We continue now at the top of Daf Chav Tes Amud Aleph in Meseches Menachos. This is Menachos Daf 29a. On the previous Amud, the Gemara is discussing the menorah, and the Gemara said there are 22 Geviim, 22 goblets that are carved into the menorah. And the Gemara says we understand that there are 22 of them because there are 4 on the central branch of the menorah. V'tam Sari Dekanim, and then on the other branches there's another 18 plus 4, Ha'esrin V'tartin, that's a total of 22. And Rashi explains, Tam Sari Dekanim Dichsiv, it's written, Shlosha Geviim Mishukadim Bekano Echad. It says each branch had 3, and if each branch had 3 and there are 6 branches, again that's 18 plus the 4 on the central branch, that's a total of 22. And the Gemara continues, Kaftorin Nami, with regards to the knobs as well, Achad Osir, there's a total of 11. Kaftorin Trei Dida, because you have the 2 knobs that are on the central branch, Vishisha Dekanim, and then each one of the branches has 1, so that's another 6, that's a total of 8. V'chaftor, and then on the central branch there's a knob at each point where the other branches extend outward from the central branch, so those are another 3. Hachad Sar, that comes to a total of 11. Ela Parachim Tisha Menolan, but where do we find that there are 9 flowers? Parachim Trei Dida, we understand that there are 2 flowers that are on the central branch. Vishisha Dekanim, and then there's another 6, 1 for each branch. So Tamanya have it, that's only 8, that's not 9. Where do we get the 9th one? Amar Rav Shalman says, Ksiv, it's written in the pasuk, Ad Yirecha, Ad Pircha, Mikshahi, it talks about the flower that is at the bottom, that is near the base of the menorah, and so that's the additional, that's the 9th one, the 9th flower on the menorah. And the Gemara continues, Amar Rav says, Gova shel menorah tisha tvachim, the height of the menorah is 9 tvachim. Eisvei Rav Shimi bar Chia l'Rav, Rav Shimi bar Chia asked Rav a question from the following Mishnah. This is a Mishnah in Meseches Talmud. The Mishnah says, Evan Haisa lefnei menorah, there was a stone in front of the menorah. Uva shalosh malos shelah ha-kohen omed, and there were 3 steps on that the Kohen stood upon that, umeitav es haneros, in order to prepare the candles of the menorah. So apparently it was high enough that one needed to ascend on some steps in order to be meitiv es haneros. That certainly seems to be higher than 9 tvachim. Amarle said to him, Shimi, are you asking this question? Ki amina, what am I talking about when I said that it's 9 tvachim? Misvas kanamu lamala, that's only from the point where the branches start extending out from the central branch. From there upward, that is 9 tvachim. And Rashi explains, Shimiya tatohu, actually, you're asking me this question, Bitmiya, this is like a wonder, Misvas konim ulamalo haisates, from the konim, from where the branches start extending, that's where it's 9 tvachim, umin haaretz vi'ad lekonim, but from the earth, from the ground, until the first of those branches test, that's another 9 tvachim, Kedim Mefarish Leil, as explained earlier, that's why it's a total, really, of 18 tvachim. And the Gemara continues, Ksiv, it's written in the pasuk in Divrei Hayomim, V'haperach, and the flower, V'haneros, and the candles, V'hamelkachayim, and the tongs, Zov hu michlos zav, it was gold, it was pure gold. And the Gemara asks, My michlos zav, what is this term, a michlos zav, which indicates pure or perfect gold? Amar Rav Ami says, Shekiloso l'chol zav sagor shel Shlomo, that these vessels of the Beis HaMikdash, they exhausted all of these zahav sagor. Zahav sagor literally means the closed gold, but again, it means the pure gold. This exhausted all of that pure gold of Shlomo HaMelech. The Amar Rav Yehuda Amar Rav, because Rav Yehuda said that Rav said, Eser menoros asa Shlomo. Shlomo made 10 menoros, v'chol achas v'achas, hevi lo 1000 kikar zav. For each one he brought 1,000 talents of gold. V'hechnisu 1000 pa'amim lakur. He entered it 1,000 times into the kiln. V'hemidu al kikar, and then he turned that 1,000 kikar zav into 1 kikar, because he refined that gold to its perfection. But the Gemara continues and asks, Ini, is this really the case? V'aksib, but it's written in Sefer Melachim. It says, V'chol klei mashke hamelech Shlomo zav, and all of King Shlomo's drinking vessels were zahav, were gold. V'chol kli beis yar halavonon zav sagor, and all of the vessels of the beis yar halavonon, the house in the forest of Lebanon, they were pure gold. Ein kesef nechshav imei Shlomo l'meuma, silver was nothing in the times of Shlomo. And the Gemara continues and answers, Zahav Sagor Koamrinan, when we say that it exhausted all of the gold of Shlomo HaMelech, it's just the Zahav Sagor, again, the pure gold, but there was plenty of other gold that Shlomo HaMelech had. But the Gemara continues and asks, Umi chaser kuli hai, does refining gold cause it to lose so much quantity? V'atanya, but we learned in a brayso, Rabbi Yossi, Rabbi Yehuda Omer, Rabbi Yossi, Rabbi Yehuda says, Ma'isa v'haisa menoras Beis HaMikdash. There was an incident that the menorah of the Beis HaMikdash was Yisera al Shel Moshe, B'dinor Zav Kordiyakini. It was greater in size than the one of Moshe Rabbeinu by a little bit, by just a dinar Zav Kordiyakini. V'chnisua pei pa'amim lakur, and they entered it 80 times into the kiln. V'hamidu al kikar, and then it ended up being the size of a kikar, and so therefore you see even 80 times it only loses a small quantity. And the Gemara continues and answers, Kevan de koi, once it's already been mostly refined, so it's refined, and then when you put it into that furnace, it's not going to lose so much quantity, but in the beginning, when you start the refining process, it does lose a lot more. And Rashi explains, V'aksiv ein kesef nechshav, doesn't it say in the pasuk that silver was nothing in the times of Shlomo HaMelech? Alma Asher have, we see that he was wealthy. V'yata amert keliso, but you said before that he exhausted all of that gold. And the Gemara then answered that was talking about the perfect gold. And Rashi continues, Umi chaser kuli hai, does it really lose that much in quantity? The koamert elef hakikor hechniso elef pamim lakor, you said that the 1,000 kikor was entered 1,000 times into the furnace, ad sheyamud al kikor, until it was just a kikor. Alma b'chol pam chaser kikor, you see that every time it's entered into the furnace, it loses a kikor. Kordiyakni was Shem Matveya, that's the name of a certain kind of coin. Kevon de koi shenisraf yofe b'mei Shlomo koi, once it was already burned, it was purified properly in the days of Shlomo, so that's where it's at. Lefikach lo chaser achshav el dinar, that's why now it only loses a dinar, again when it's entered into the furnace. And the Gemara continues, Amar Rav Shmuel bar Nachmani, Amar Rav Yonasan, Rav Shmuel bar Nachmani says that Rav Yonasan says, Mai dechsiv, what does it mean when it's written in the pasuk al ha-menorah ha-tahora, it says the menorah that is tahora, that is pure. What it means is sheyardu ma'aseh mimakom tahara, that the way to make it came from a pure place. HaKadosh Baruch Hu showed Moshe Rabbeinu how to make the menorah. The Gemara continues and asks Ela me'ata, but according to that, ala shulchan hatar, there's a similar pasuk by the shulchan. The pasuk says ala shulchan hatar, it also calls it pure. Sheyardu ma'asav mimakom tar, does that also mean the same thing? That how to make it came from a place that was pure. HaKadosh Baruch Hu showed Moshe Rabbeinu. Ela rather tar michlal shu tameh, rather the word tar by shulchan, it implies that it could in theory be tameh. Hachanami here also, when it comes to the menorah, tahora, michlal shi tameya means tahora, it's implying that it could be tameh. And so therefore, why are we interpreting it, sheyardu maseh mimakom tahara? And the Gemara continues and answers, B'shalom mahasam, it makes sense over there, meaning by the shulchan, it makes sense to say that it's implying that it could be tameh, because kid Reish Lakish, it's like Reish Lakish. The Amr Reish Lakish, because Reish Lakish said, Mai dechsiv, what does it mean when it's written in the pasuk ala shulchan hatar? It says the shulchan that is tahar, mechlal shu tameh, that implies that it could be tameh. Kli eitza asli lenachasu, the shulchan is a kli eitz, it's made out of wood, and it's asli lenachas, it's made to be in one place, it's not made to be moved around. And the general rule is, v'chol kli eitza asli lenachas, anytime you have a wooden vessel that's asli lenachas, eino mekabel tumah, it doesn't receive tumah, it doesn't become tameh. And over here it implies that it could become tameh. Ela rather melamed, it teaches shemagbian oso laole regalim, that it's not always asli lenachas, it's not always in one place. They would lift it up for those who were visiting at the regel, those who were ascending at the holiday. Umarim lahem lechem haponim, and they would show to them, they would show to the ole regalim the lechem haponim, the bread that was on that table. V'yomer lehem, and say to them, Ru'uchi baschem lefnei ha'makom, see how beloved you are in front of HaKadosh Baruch Hu. And the Gemara asks, Ma'chi baschem, what does it mean beloved? Why does the lechem haponim show a certain love of HaKadosh Baruch Hu? The Gemara answers, Kid Rabbi Yoshua ben Levi, it's like Rabbi Yoshua ben Levi. The Amar Rabbi Yoshua ben Levi, because Rabbi Yoshua ben Levi said, Neis gadol nasa belechem haponim, there was a great miracle with the lechem haponim, siluko kesidura, when it was removed from the table, it was just like it was when it was arranged on the table, it was even hot. Shenemar, as it says in the pasuk, there's a pasuk in Sefer Shmuel, the pasuk says, Losum lechem cham biyom hilocho, it says that it was lechem cham, again it says that it was a hot lechem at the time it was taken, and so you see again, siluko kesiduro, and that's what they were showing, the ole regalim. And the point over here is that it makes sense to say that the pasuk is informing us that the shulchan was lifted up, and therefore it's able to be makabel tumah. Elahacha, but over here, when it comes to the menorah, tahora mechlal shi tameya, is the pasuk saying tahora just to tell us that it could become tamei. Pshita, that's actually too obvious. Klei matchas nenu, the menorah is made out of, it's a vessel that's made out of metal. Uchlei matchas mekabel tuma, the general rule is that a vessel made out of metal, vessels that are made out of metal, are mekabel tuma. That's of course the case. The pasuk doesn't need to tell us that. Ella, rather, what's the pasuk saying? Sheyardu ma'aseha mimokom tahara, that the way to make the menorah that came from a pure place, it came directly from HaKadosh Baruch Hu. And the Gemara continues, Tanya, we learned in a brayso, Rabbi Yossi, Rabbi Yehuda Omer, Rabbi Yossi, Rabbi Yehuda says, Aron shalesh, v'shulchan shalesh, u'menorah shalesh, yardu min hashamayim, an aron of fire, and a table of fire, and a menorah of fire, they descended from the heavens. V'ram Moshe, and Moshe saw them, v'yasa kemosam, and that's how he knew how to make them, and he made it according to what he saw. Shenemar, as it says in the pasuk, u're'ei va'asei kesav nisam, asher atamara bahar, you should see and you should do like the pattern that you saw, that you were shown at Har Sinai. The Gemara continues and asks, but according to that, a similar language is used by the Mishkan itself. It says that you'll put up the Mishkan kimishbato, like the way that you were shown on the mountain. And the Gemara says, Hachinami, are you going to say the same thing over there as well, that there was a Mishkan of fire that came down? And the Gemara continues and answers, it's different over there. Hacha ksiv kimishpato. Here it's written kimishpato, which indicates that the instructions were given. But hasam ksiv kesav nisam. But over there it says ketav nisam, like their pattern. That indicates that he was actually shown an image of what they would look like. And the Gemara continues, Amar Rabbi Chia bar Abba, Amar Rabbi Yochanan. Rabbi Chia bar Abba says that Rabbi Yochanan says, Gavriel chagor kamin psikya haya. Gavriel was wearing a type of a belt. It's like a wide belt. V'heralo leMoshe, and he showed to Moshe Maisa menorah. He showed him how to make the menorah. Dechsiv, as it's written, V'zem Masa HaMenorah. It says this is the Masa HaMenorah. Tana Devei Rabbi Shmuel, it was taught in the yeshiva of Rabbi Shmuel. Shlosha devarim hayu kashin lo leMoshe at sheheralo HaKadosh Baruch Hu be'etzbo. There were three things that Moshe found difficult until HaKadosh Baruch Hu showed him with his finger, v'elohein, and they are as follows: menorah, the menorah, as we said, v'rosh chodesh, and the new moon, ushratzim, and the creeping creatures which are tamei. Menorah dechsev v'zem masa ha-menorah. Menorah, as it's written in the pasuk, this is the masa ha-menorah. Rosh chodesh dechsev rosh chodesh, because it's written ha-chodesh hazel lochem rosh chodashim. This new moon, this represents the beginning of the month. And shratzim dechsev shratzim, as it's written, v'zel lochem ha-tamei. This for you is tamei, is impure. V'yesh and some say af hilchas shchita. It's also true that the laws of shchita were shown in this fashion. Shenemar, as it says in the pasuk, v'zeh asher tasa al hamizbeach. This is what you will do on the altar. And the Gemara continues at the two dots. The Mishnah said, Shtei parshios shebe mezuzah, the two parshios in the mezuzah, ma'akvos azu azu, they are required for one another. Ve'afilu ksav echad, even one letter missing, ma'akvan, prevents the mitzvah from being fulfilled. And the Gemara asks, Pshita, isn't it obvious? Rashi explains, Pshita da'os achas ma'akvasan. It's obvious that one letter can hold back the mitzvah from being fulfilled. Dechsivu chsavtam, because it says in the pasuk chsavtam, and we learn from that, ksivatam, it has to be a complete writing, and so therefore it's obvious. And the Gemara continues, Amar Rav Yehuda Amar Rav. Rav Yehuda says that Rav says, Lo nitzrucha ella lekotza shel yud. What this is necessary for is for the kotza shel yud. Literally, this is the thorn of the yud. There's a machlokas rishonim exactly what kotza shel yud refers to. Rashi explains, kotza shel yud regel yemini shel yud. We're talking about the right leg of the yud. If that is missing, even that is going to prevent the fulfillment of the mitzvah. But the Gemara continues and asks, V'hanami pshita, but isn't that also obvious? Rashi explains, Hanami pshita halo nasis haos. The letter has not been made properly if it's missing the kotza shel yud, so that's also obvious. And so the Gemara continues instead and says, Ella rather l'chi'idach, to Rav Yehuda Amar Rav. It's for the other teaching of Rav Yehuda Amar Rav. The Amar Rav Yehuda Amar Rav, because Rav Yehuda said that Rav said, Kol os she'ein gevil mukaf lo me'arba ruchoseh. Any letter, if you don't have the parchment surrounding it on all four sides, psula, then it is disqualified. And Rashi explains, she'ein gevil mukaf lo shemudbekes ba'os acheres. According to Rashi, what this simply means is if that one letter is attached to the letter that's next to it, it's touching that next letter, that's going to be a disqualification. V'hainu tikatani ksav echad ma'akvan. That's what the Mishnah means when it says ksav echad ma'akvan, that one letter can prevent the fulfillment of the mitzvah. Kilomar, it means to say hilchos mishpat osachas. The law is relevant to one letter. Ma'akvo lemezuzah utfilin. Again, those are going to prevent the fulfillment of the mitzvah by mezuzah and tefillin. And the Gemara continues, Amar Ashian bar Nadvach mishmei Rav Yehuda. Ashian bar Nadvach says, in the name of Rav Yehuda, Nikev tocho shel hay. If there's a hole in the middle of the hay, kosher, then it's kosher. But Yerecho, but if that's that's by the leg of the hay, pasul, then it is disqualified. And Rashi explains, Tocho shel hay regel shebifnim. The first explanation of Rashi is we're talking about the inner leg, that's Tocho shel hay. That would be the left leg, and Yerecho is regel hayemonis. The Yerecho of the hay refers to the right leg. That's the first explanation of Rashi. Lishna Achrina, Rashi gives another explanation. Tocho, when it says Tocho shel hay, that there's a hole inside the hay, that's hagavil v'hacholak shebesocho. That's the parchment that's in the middle of the hay. That's where the hole is. And Rashi says, Uvitfilin kamairi. Rashi says here we're dealing with tefillin. The commentators address this part of Rashi. Why does Rashi say only tefillin? Presumably it should be true, let's say, by mezuzah as well. But in any case, again, Rashi says we're dealing here with tefillin and gives two explanations of what it means tocho shel hay, what it means yirecho shel hay. And the Gemara continues, Amar Rabbi Zera says, L'didi mefarshali mine de Rav Huna. To me it was explained from Rav Huna of Rabbi Yaakov. Amar Rabbi Yaakov says, L'didi mefarshali mine de Rav Yehuda. To me it was explained from Rav Yehuda as follows, Nikev tocho shel hay kosher. If there's a hole in the tocho shel hay, it's kosher. Yerecho, and in terms of yerecho, the leg of the hay, im nishtayir bo kashir os katan, as long as there remains of the leg of the hay the amount, the size of a small letter, which is the letter yud, kosher, then it's kosher. V'im lav, and if not pasul, then it is pasul. And the Gemara continues, Agra chamud Rabbi Abba, Agra the father-in-law of Rabbi Abba, and we will continue with this discussion in the next video on Daf Tes Amid Beis.